Welcome to this new how-to. In this how-to we're gonna look at how you can start the engines of the Pilatus PC 6, but then the passenger version. In an earlier video we looked at the, I think it's the parachute version where people can really jump out of the aircraft. In this video we're gonna look at the, passenger version. And if you look at the dashboard, it looks a little bit different compared to the passenger version. And if you look at the back, it also looks different because there you can see the passengers which can take place in the aircraft. There are a few things which you need to keep in mind, and one of them is that if you start the aircraft like me on a parking spot, several things have already been switched on. Like the battery, some lights are switched on. So that's something you need to be aware of, right? So you can close the generator cover by doing this, but as you can see that it looks like that there is an issue with it because it opens directly, but hopefully it will be fixed in the future. Initially you might think, hey, let's use the checklist. The checklist can be used, however the same thing happens as with the other one, with the other PC6, is that the highlighting of the correct components is not working correctly at this moment. So let's start the engines. So we can use the checklist, but then we simply need to find all the things manually, right? So some of them are highlighted, but most of them are not. As you can see, the power brake is highlighted, but for example the parking brake is also, but the control locks, that one is not highlighted. So this one needs to be set to cutoff, which is the case. Then we need to go to the starter switch, which also isn't highlighted, so you need to figure out where it is yourself. It isn't here, so that's good. So let's keep it as is. Then you've got the generator, which is off. The generator can be found, let's say here. Right, here's the generator. You can also reset the generator by, moving the button down, or moving the option down, or the button. Yeah, it really is a button, right? And then it will go, it will reset it. If you switch it to the top, it will be switched on. Then you've got the aux fuel pump, and that one's also not listed here. I tried to find it, and it's here, right? So it's here. You can find the fuel pump, which you can, activate. They've got all the other options like the landing lights, which you can find on the bottom here. You've got the initiations test, and that's the only button I couldn't find. So if you find it, let me know where you did find it, because I looked all across the aircraft and there was, nothing I could find about that one, to be honest. So that's a little bit, nasty. Then we've got the battery switch, and the battery switch, you will find it here. So you need to make sure it's on, and if you do that, you will see that the main display switches on, right? Which is the Garmin system, which is built into this aircraft. And here we see the other part of the Garmin system, including the part where you can control the engine, or at least monitor the engine, I should say. Then we've got the radios, and the radio part 3, you can find it here. This is for the autopilot, which we will cover in another episode of this video, or if this airplane, I should say. The fuel valve needs to be open. The fuel valve, just as with the other PC6, can be found here. It's a little bit unclear, I would say, if it's open or closed, but let's assume that this is open. It looks like it is, because it's, if you see here, it says open, but it's a little bit hard to see. Then you've got the instruments, and then you've got the oil temperature, check above 40 degrees, and the oil temperature, you can find it here. So it's currently at 21 degrees. Then the fuel shaft valve, that's the one. Here, it's open, at least I assume it's open, maybe it's closed, but we will figure that out. We've got the propeller area, and that one is clear. Let's double check, right? If no one is walking around, it looks clear to me. And then we've got the starter switch, And that's the next challenge, because where can we find the starter switch? So initially you might think, hey, they are located here, but these are all the light buttons, so you can't find it here. So what you need to do is you need to go up to here, and it's hidden, I would say, under a cover button. So you need to open the covers, and then you can switch on the starter and then the ignition. And then you will see that the propeller starts rotating. Keep in mind that you need to make sure that your throttle is set to idle. And then keep an eye on the other meters, right? Keep an eye on the RPMs. You will see the PSI increasing. You will see that the temperature will increase. Make sure that you see no red alerts blinking here, because then something is not good. So idle. Looks good. So it's spinning nicely. Then you've got the low idle RPM, and that's this one. At least this is the propeller control, where you can control how slow or how fast the propeller runs, right? Currently it's set in this position, and it's also applicable for the engine condition, which is also set to low and idle. Keep it there until you, I would say, really start to take off. So once the engine runs, you can switch off these buttons and hide the covers again to prevent that you're doing something wrong. The oil pressure, that's the next thing we need to check. It's in the green zone, as you can see. That's the oil PSI. It's a green zone. It's currently at 90, and the temperature, that's the ITT, which you can find here. That's also set correctly. So nothing to worry about. Which brings us to the next step, and that's the RPM. Needs to be set to full forward, and the RPM leveler can be found here. This is the propeller, and this is the engine control. So those need to be set to, I would say, full steam ahead, power max. And the engine one, you can also set it to full max, because if you don't set those two to full max, then you don't have enough power to take off. The NG, again, it's not lighted, but I think the NG is, I'm not sure what the NG is, to be honest. So let's assume that this is correct. It needs to be above 51%. Oh, here it is, the NG. The NG is listed here, and it's 65, so that's good. Radio avionics, they're on, but you can't see much currently. The autopilot is still switched off, right? We don't use it yet. The compass, you can synchronize it. So here's the compass, and you will have a compass also on a different spot, if I'm correct. But that could be only, I'm double checking, because maybe it's only the, let's say, the non-passenger flight aircraft. I do think that's the case, because I don't see the compass here, so you don't need to do much there, right? So that's, say, we can skip it for now. The attitude indicator erected, so don't forget to set the altimeter, right, by pressing the letter B. And of course make sure that the generator is switched on, and that's something we didn't do yet. A generator can be found here. It's a little bit unclear if this is on, but it looks like, so assume this is on. The fuel pump, we didn't use it. And then you can make sure that the lights are switched on, right? The beacons are switched on. Some of them are, I would say the mouse button clicking it, and some of them require you to use the scroll button. You can use the cabin light, but that's over here, and it's not really needed to do that. Then we can go to the before taxiing, and actually we did everything, right? The only thing we didn't check is the passengers, and then we can simply start taxiing. So let's try to do that. So let's remove the parking brake, and you can see that directly after we remove the parking brake, the aircraft starts driving, taxiing, we should say. So you don't have to increase throttle at all to start the taxiing process. So let's follow the taxi. lines, which are the yellow lines here. Use the, I would say, brake with caution, because the aircraft itself is running on the back of, it has, I would say, it's overhauled to the back, right? So be aware of that. So we're gonna check. And there we see the runway. That's the runway we're gonna take off from. It's a runway number 7 Kilo or 7 Romeo, sorry, and 25 Lima. So we're gonna decrease the speed. So do it very carefully again, because else you might go and collapse to the front, which you of course don't want to do. So once we're here, we can set the parking brakes again, but be careful, because you can see that the aircraft goes to the front. And then you can open a checklist again to go to it manually, right? So before takeoff, we got the stabilizer trimmed, we've got the flaps, we can set them, right? And that, the strange thing is that that won't work, so you can either do it with your mouse or with your keyboard. Stabilizer trim is set. That's this one. This is the pitch trim, and here you've got the cover, right, to interrupt it. But let's leave it closed, because probably it's closed for a reason. Altimeter is set. We've got the fuel quantity. The fuel quantity, we also need to make sure that we of course have enough fuel with us. Now you will of course want to know where to find it. Well, that's a good question. So let's search for it. Maybe it's... No, this is the power itself. Oh, here it is. Fuel quantity. Overlooked it quickly. So here you can see the fuel quantity. The auxiliary fuel pump needs to be switched to on, and the auxiliary fuel pump can be found here next to the bus generator. The anti-ice options, those can be set, but it's not, I would say, strict requirement. These can be found here. You've got the heating, and here you've got the defrost. We've got the propeller de-ice. The propeller de-ice, that's a good one. Where to find it? It's here, right? So here you can find also the other anti-ice option. I think this is the one they mention here in the list. So you can switch on the anti-ice and the prop de-ice. You can switch on the avionics buses. And that's kind of weird, because it's not mentioned anywhere in the manual that you need to switch them on, but I assume that you need to switch them on. Flight controls were checked. Oil temperature is still in the green. Heating control, not sure where it is. Could be these buttons. These are checked. And the idle control lever, high idle. That's this one, right? So we already set it to high idle, but officially they say, okay, hey, you need to do it during the takeoff, right? So let's see if we can take off with this aircraft. So we're gonna, you can also test stall, right, by pressing it. You can also test the caution button and test the warning light. So let's go full steam ahead. Already going airborne, so then you can't make the changes anymore with the pedals. So, and we've taken off with this aircraft, right? So it was not that hard finding. The hardest part was finding the correct buttons, which are on a completely different spot compared to the I would say parachute version. So that's something which you need to keep in mind, that it's not exactly the same. So we're gonna adjust the trim a bit. So once you're airborne and once you're at, I would say, correct speed, you can reduce the propeller and also reduce the engine condition to low idle. And the reason I'm saying that is because if you do that, you will see that the RPMs will drop, but also the temperature will drop eventually. You see it's currently fluctuating a bit, but it's definitely recommended to use those buttons once you're airborne, because you will reduce a lot of, I would say, fuel usage with it. If you're going full steam ahead continuously, it will have an impact on the fuel usage. So that's it. So we're flying. Here ends this video, because we're gonna look at all the other options in a later video. So we're gonna look at the autopilot, for example, in another video, and we're also gonna look at the navigation system itself in a different video. Although the navigation system is probably something we might not do, because it's similar to the other ones which are already known to most of you. But maybe I decide to do it. So keep an eye on my channel if you're interested in getting more videos about this aircraft. Here ends this video. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, then consider to use the like button. If you've got questions or comments, then make sure that you're providing them in the comment box below the video. And if you want to stay up to date about new videos I'm posting, then make sure that you're subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.